There's a particular kind of regret that tends to arrive in a man's 40s or 50s. It doesn't come loudly. It comes in quiet moments, a Sunday afternoon, a long drive, a conversation that goes somewhere unexpectedly honest. And it sounds something like this: "I always assumed I'd figure that out eventually." The problem is that eventually has a way of arriving while you were busy doing other things. And certain skills, the ones that determine the quality of your relationships, the depth of your peace, the respect you carry without having to demand it, these don't develop automatically with age. They have to be deliberately built. And the longer you wait, the more expensive the gap becomes. Today we're talking about 7 of them. Not the obvious ones, not go to the gym or save your money, though those matter. These are the deeper skills. The ones that separate a man who has lived from a man who has merely aged. The ones that compound quietly over years and show up in every area of your life simultaneously. And the good news, genuinely, is that none of them have an expiration date. Each one can be built starting today. This is Aphorism Archive. Let's get into it. We start here because this is the skill that makes every other skill on this list either work or collapse. One that most self-development content for men barely mentions, which is part of why so many older men are quietly carrying the weight of fractured relationships they don't know how to address. The ability to repair, to acknowledge a rupture in a relationship, take genuine ownership of your part in it, and do the specific work of rebuilding trust, is a skill. It doesn't come naturally to most people, and it runs against several things that many men were socialized to believe: that apologizing is weakness, that bringing up old wounds reopens them unnecessarily, that time heals without intervention. The research on this is clear and worth knowing. Psychologist John Gottman's decades of work on relationship dynamics found that it's not the absence of conflict or rupture that distinguishes lasting, healthy relationships, it's the speed and quality of repair. Couples and individuals who have learned to repair effectively can survive significant conflict and emerge with more trust than before. Those who avoid repair watch relationships slowly calcify. For older men, the specific landscape of repair often involves adult children, relationships complicated by the parenting decisions of earlier decades, by absence or emotional unavailability, by patterns that were modeled without awareness. It involves long-term partnerships that have accumulated unresolved resentments. It involves friendships that drifted and were never consciously retrieved. None of these require grand gestures or exhausting emotional excavation. What repair actually requires is the willingness to say, specifically and without deflection, "I understand what I contributed to this, and I want to address it directly." That sentence, meant genuinely, opens more doors than most men realize. The second skill is physical, but I want to frame it deliberately differently than most fitness content does, not as aesthetics, not as performance, but as stewardship. The responsible, long-term care of the physical instrument you live in. The research on this is among the most consistent in all of health science. A landmark study from the Cooper Institute tracking over 43,000 patients over several decades found that cardiorespiratory fitness in midlife was the single strongest predictor of mortality risk, stronger than smoking history, stronger than obesity, stronger than cholesterol levels. The men in the highest fitness quartile at age 45 had dramatically better health outcomes into their 70s and 80s than those in the lowest quartile, regardless of other risk factors. But the physical skill most relevant for older men specifically isn't cardiovascular fitness alone. It's the combination of strength training, mobility, and recovery management that determines functional quality of life, the ability to do what you want to do, with your body, for as long as possible. Researcher Stuart Phillips at McMaster University has shown that resistance training in older men not only preserves muscle mass but actively reverses several age-related cellular changes. The body responds to appropriate challenge at any age. What this skill requires practically is a shift from the athletic identity of youth, performance, competition, peak output, to a maintenance and longevity orientation. The question changes from how much can I lift, to what practices, maintained consistently, will let me move well and feel capable at 75? That's a different question, and it leads to different, more sustainable behaviors. This also means sleep, arguably the most underrated performance variable in existence, and the deliberate management of recovery. Matthew Walker's research at Berkeley has documented the cascade of physical and cognitive consequences of chronic sleep deprivation in middle-aged adults. Building a consistent, protected sleep practice is, at this life stage, among the highest return physical investments available. The third skill is the one most men are least likely to expect on a list like this, and almost certainly the one most in need of explicit development. The ability to ask for help, clearly, specifically, without shame, and before the situation reaches crisis level, is one of the most practically important skills an older man can build. And it's one that runs directly against the socialization most men received, that needing help signals inadequacy, that self-sufficiency is the measure of strength, that vulnerability in asking is a form of weakness. The consequences of this belief are well documented and genuinely serious. Men are significantly less likely than women to seek mental health support, medical attention, or professional guidance in financial or legal matters, consistently, across cultures and income levels. The result is that men tend to arrive at problems later, when they are more severe and more costly to address. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention notes that men die by suicide at a rate roughly 4 times that of women, not because they experience more distress, but because they are less likely to reach out before reaching a point of crisis. The reframe that matters here, asking for help, is not the surrender of capability. It's the application of intelligence to the recognition that no single person has all the relevant competence for every challenge they'll face. The most effective leaders, the most successful entrepreneurs, the most resilient individuals in the research literature share a common trait: they build networks of support deliberately and use them without shame. For older men specifically, this skill shows up in several practical forms: building a relationship with a therapist or counselor before you desperately need one, having a primary care physician you actually see regularly, cultivating friendships that can hold honest conversation about difficulty, and being willing to hire expertise, legal, financial, medical, rather than navigating complex territory alone out of pride. The fourth skill is communicative, but I want to focus on the listening half rather than the speaking half, because it's the more underdeveloped side in most men, and because the research on its impact is remarkable. Psychologist Carl Rogers, one of the founders of humanistic psychology, identified what he called active listening, listening that is fully present, non-judgmental, and focused on understanding rather than formulating a response, as the single most therapeutically powerful behavior one person can offer another. Decades of subsequent research have confirmed this across contexts: in marriage, in parenting, in leadership, in friendship. The people who consistently report feeling most genuinely connected to someone else describe that person not as the best talker in their life, but as the person who makes them feel most heard. For older men, deep listening tends to require dismantling a few specific habits: the impulse to problem solve before fully understanding what's being shared, the tendency to compare experiences rather than stay with the speaker's experience, and the discomfort with emotional content that leads many men to redirect conversations toward the practical before the emotional has been fully received. The practical development of this skill is less complicated than it sounds. It begins with a single shift in orientation, entering conversations with the explicit goal of understanding, not responding. Asking follow-up questions that go deeper into what the person said rather than pivoting to your own experience. And, critically, being willing to sit with what someone has shared for a moment before immediately moving forward. The men who develop this skill find that their relationships change in ways that are almost startling. They become the person people come to when something is real. That's not a small thing. The fifth skill is the one that gives all the others direction, and it's the one that is most specific to men in the second half of life, the ability to think deliberately about legacy, what you are building, for whom, and why. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson identified what he called generativity, the concern for establishing and guiding the next generation, as the central developmental task of middle adulthood. His research and the decades of work it spawned found consistently that men who develop a generative orientation, who are actively invested in contributing something beyond their own immediate interests, report higher life satisfaction, greater sense of purpose, and better psychological health outcomes than those who remain focused primarily on self-advancement. Legacy in this context doesn't require wealth, fame, or grand achievement. It's the deliberate shaping of what you pass forward, the values you model for children or younger people in your orbit, the quality of relationships you invest in, the communities you contribute to, the knowledge and perspective you make available to others. It's the question, asked honestly and regularly, of what the people who know you best will carry from having known you. For older men, this skill involves a specific kind of honest inventory. Not a performance review, not a comparison to external benchmarks, but a genuine reckoning with the gap between the legacy you are currently building by default and the legacy you would choose to build deliberately. Those two things are often meaningfully different. And the gap between them is where the most important work lives. The aphorism that applies: a man who knows what he wants to leave behind lives differently than a man who is simply trying to get through the day. Generativity isn't a destination. It's an orientation. And it can begin at any age, with the next decision you make. The sixth skill is emotional regulation, the ability to experience a difficult feeling without being immediately controlled by it, is one of the most studied constructs in modern psychology. Neuroscientist James Gross at Stanford has spent decades mapping what he calls the process model of emotion regulation, the ability to notice an emotional response, pause before acting on it, and choose a response that serves your actual interests rather than just your immediate reactivity. For older men specifically, this skill carries particular weight. Because by the time you're in your 40s or 50s, you have accumulated real stakes. You have relationships, reputations, financial positions, and responsibilities that younger men simply don't have yet. The cost of a reactive moment, an explosion in a marriage, a burned professional bridge, a word said to a child in anger that takes years to repair, is categorically higher. Here's the reframe that matters most: emotional regulation is not the suppression of feeling. That's a different and genuinely unhealthy thing, the stoic mask that many men wear until it cracks at the worst possible moment. Regulation is the ability to feel fully and respond deliberately. It's the pause between stimulus and response that Viktor Frankl identified as the space where human freedom lives. In practice, this skill is built through a consistent practice of noticing your internal state before it reaches the point of reaction. Journaling, meditation, therapy, physical training, all of these work, through different mechanisms, to increase the gap between trigger and response. The specific method matters less than the consistency of the practice. The man who has built this skill doesn't look calm because nothing bothers him. He looks calm because he's learned that his response to what bothers him is always a choice. The seventh skill is financial, but I want to be precise about what I mean, because this isn't about income level or net worth. It's about something more fundamental, the clarity and intentionality with which you relate to money. Research from the American Psychological Association consistently finds that financial stress is one of the most pervasive sources of anxiety in adult life, cutting across income levels in ways that surprise most people. Studies show that the relationship between income and financial well-being plateaus much earlier than most people expect, and that beyond a certain threshold, it's not how much someone earns but how deliberately they manage what they earn that determines financial peace. For older men who carry decades of financial habits, some intentional, many not, this skill involves an honest audit. Not judgment, just clarity. Where does money actually go? What patterns have I been running on autopilot? What financial decisions have I been postponing because looking at them honestly felt uncomfortable? The specific behaviors that constitute financial clarity at this life stage are knowing your actual numbers without avoidance, distinguishing between spending that reflects your values and spending that reflects anxiety or habit, having a clear picture of what retirement or later life financial security actually requires for you specifically, and, perhaps most importantly, having conversations about money with the people in your life whose financial reality is linked to yours. That last piece is where many men are most underdeveloped. The ability to discuss money honestly, with a partner, with adult children, with aging parents, requires both financial literacy and the communication skills we'll discuss shortly. The men who build both are the ones who navigate the second half of life with options rather than limitations.